All right, time for The Truth Is right here on the Luke Thomas Show. So I was thinking about this a little bit, and you can fade the music out. You don't need to keep it. But, okay, we have this Conor McGregor situation. Here's how we understand it at this point. At about 1 a.m. yesterday, 1:30 a.m., or I should say today, rather, he put out a tweet saying he was retiring. We've been over that. Right before the show started, the New York Times reported that he is being investigated, not charged, not prosecuted, just investigated. Conor McGregor is for what would be a serious sexual assault allegation. Now, that dates back to January. The whole point about that story, since folks seem to miss the significance of it here, the report from the New York Times is not suggesting that the worm has turned in the investigation, merely that Irish media outlets have not really named him for reasons that they can't. But the New York Times, number one, is not encumbered by that. And if you just look at global media properties, there is none as powerful and wide-ranging in terms of a global presence as the New York Times. So they're naming him, and it's this huge media institution. The relevance of that story is not that the investigation worm turned. It is that the visibility of the story now changes significantly. Now, in the end, we've talked about what it is. He's not been charged with anything. He's not under trial, nothing. He's been arrested and questioned. We are still in the accusation investigation situation. That's all where we're at, and that's all you can really say about it up to this point. I do think the New York Times publishing it is significant, but that's not what I want to talk about right now. For just a moment, let's put that out of our minds. Now, it's hard to do, but let's just try. Here's the point I wanted to make. Let's talk about this as if the stuff that's happening related to that police investigation, the reported police investigation, I should say, doesn't exist, or at least is utterly irrelevant, which, in fact, it may be. It may be utterly irrelevant. I tend to think that a tweet that comes out on the same day where you know this kind of publication is happening, they did reach out to the New York Times, did to his people before publishing, they had a sense this was coming, seems a little too coincidental, but his people have denied it, so whatever. Put that out of your mind for just a second. Center on two actors here in this particular space. One, Conor McGregor. Two, Dana White. Now, here's what's interesting about this, and what the truth is, as best I can determine it. People have said, oh, man, Dana's going to go crawling back to Conor, or, this is all going to end in some kind of situation where Conor gets what he wants. Now, I'm not going to make a prediction about how this ends. My hunch is that it ends exactly the way it started. Here's what I mean. People have said that the UFC needs Conor. He's got all the leverage here. That was true under different circumstances. That was true when ratings were falling on television, when pay-per-view buys had crumbled. And they were good for him, and they were good for Ronda. They had that big rebound year in 2016. But outside of that, he was helping out at the time when they were really, really star-dependent. And don't misunderstand me. Combat sports is always going to be star-dependent, but it was acutely true at that time. Now, Conor McGregor's a bigger global superstar than he ever has been. Of that, there can be no doubt. But I don't think we are fully comprehending some of the changes that are happening around us. Let's start on the Dana White side. Number one, he puts out this response to the story that McGregor has retired absolutely sincerely, and says, good for him, hope he's making a bunch of money with the whiskey, he's going to do great things, blah, 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 blah. He did incredible things in the octagon, we wish him well. Dude, he didn't blink one bit. He is absolutely calling Conor's bluff. Again, assuming that all this is related to any kind of business disagreement about him having to be co-main or not getting shares of the company or something in between. Dana White didn't blink for a second on that. Now, don't you find that strange? Now, the UFC often doesn't like to be leveraged, but sometimes they will soft pedal a situation where they won't necessarily comment, or maybe they comment a little bit. Man, he went right out there. He told Kevin Iole from Yahoo, MMA Junkie, releasing statements to everybody who he talks to that, hey, good for him. Happy trails. I'm sorry, that is not accidental. That is not accidental. So to me, that signals something. Number one, while Conor's celebrity is certainly higher than it's ever been, I don't know that he exactly, and I want to be careful about this, I don't know that he exactly means as much to the company as he once did. It is true that with that $4 billion dollar purchase, there was going to be this leveraging of the debt that WME had that they had to finance. But something has happened over the years. The UFC now collects more guaranteed revenue than they ever have, in part because they have this guaranteed. By the way, Cobb, did you notice when Dana White announced that, number one, all pay-per-views were going to ESPN Plus, but that also they extended the deal by 2 years? He didn't say how much that deal was worth. Like, we're not assuming it's the same $1.5 billion. You added more to that deal, right?
Yeah.
Had to have.
Yeah, for sure, have to.
Never heard a figure, did you? I didn't hear anything.
No, not that I can think of.
Right. So, number one, you probably got more money for the deal. Okay. Number two, part of the reason why they want to move to all the pay-per-views to ESPN Plus is, first of all, it's a huge service to ESPN Plus to really stick it to DAZN and any other streamer who wants to get into the space. Apple announced yesterday, not so much sports, but their own streaming service. That's a tech giant getting into the streaming space. You've already got the other ones out there as well. So it's a huge favor to them. But more than that, they're going to get guaranteed money up front for that. Not everything they would have made on pay-per-view, but the UFC might be able to get less pay-per-view buys and as much, if not more money, either from guarantees from ESPN or by taking a bigger cut of what's left over. In other words, I don't know this for a fact, but my hunch is, while they would look, everybody wants to do business. Again, this situation with the New York Times reporting notwithstanding. But that aside, even with the Miami incident and the Brooklyn incident, dude, they want to do business with the guy. He is literally, he holds the most or the second most successful boxing pay-per-view of all time and the most successful MMA pay-per-view of all time. That's a guy you want to do business with. Here's the reality, though. I honestly believe that the UFC is getting upwards of $500, $600, $700 million, close to that, annually in guaranteed revenue. I don't know how much they're going to get from ESPN. I don't know what kind of cut they're going to get from each pay-per-view buy the next time around. They would love to do business with Conor McGregor. And I'm not saying that they don't need him. Everybody needs him. But they're not reliant upon him in the way that I think that they once were. He is coming off of the loss to Mayweather and then the loss to Khabib. His global popularity has surged, but his stock as a fighter has diminished. Accompany that with changes to their business structure globally in terms of how much guaranteed revenue they get from overseas television deals, for example. Then this new deal where all the pay-per-views are going through ESPN. ESPN is giving them money for that. They extended their deal by 2 more years, so now it's a 7-year deal that they have making money. And they might be getting a bigger cut from the pay-per-view, so even if sales diminish, they still take in more. Dude, that they have the leverage. I think we have to say that out loud. Yes, of course, they would love to do business with Conor. But the way in which they have guaranteed revenue streams set up that are not just a lot, they are significant. That gives them a ton of leverage that they didn't have before. Dude, when pay-per-view was being done the way it was being done before, we had to split it a million different ways to the fighters, to the MSOs, to various other entities. When you were all dependent on Fox ratings that were kind of and he was the champ. Yeah, dude, he had a lot of leverage. He had a lot of leverage to call fights and to call places on cards. And I'm not saying he has no leverage. That's not the point that I'm making. I guess what I'm saying is I don't think it's nearly as much as folks think it is. What is he going to do? Oh, you know what, UFC? I'm going to go fight for DAZN. He can't. Oh, I'm going to go box for DAZN. He can't. Without some protracted court battle. Or their blessing, where they again take more money afterwards. Oh, I'm going to go do pro wrestling. He can't. It's that same contract. You're like, well, Luke, didn't you say that about Mayweather and McGregor? That contract provision that prevents any UFC athlete from fighting any other MMA organization or boxing fight or pro wrestling or anything, all that is still in play. They just negotiated around it. It still had to be addressed. They just found a way to make it work. You've got Conor McGregor, who the New York Times is reporting has, again, they're accusations. I want to be perfectly clear about that. accusations about him. He got in trouble in Miami for something I consider relatively frivolous, but okay. You got that. You got the Brooklyn thing. Like, you're not the double champ anymore. Your popularity is at all-time high, but the revenue streams have changed where we're not as dependent on your star power. I'm not sure I understand where he has all the leverage here. It would be a better world where Conor McGregor comes back and everyone all makes money together. But how is he going to force them? He can't go to anyone else to make them do something. He can sit out, and that's not good for their bottom line, but they have more guaranteed revenue than ever. Dude, it used to be that a huge majority of their revenue at the UFC, 50% and more, was all based on pay-per-view. And that pay-per-view could come and go, man. If the stars were aligned and they were bright, they could make a ton of cash. And if they weren't, there'd be some lean days. They're getting rid of a lot of that uncertainty. Guaranteed revenue, guaranteed revenue, guaranteed revenue, licensed revenue. They're not as dependent. They are dependent on stars to have bigger pay-per-view returns. It's not like they can all of a sudden give the finger to everybody. That's not what I'm saying. But in a showdown with Conor, in a world where they're not as nearly susceptible to market swings, and fighters are the ones who can help raise the market or their absence can lower it, they have resistance to that now. I don't think a lot of folks are talking about that. It's not just that you have to pay more money to go behind the paywall to then watch everything on the streaming service and, isn't that inconvenient? Yeah, of course it's inconvenient. The issue is the resistance it gives them to manipulation to star power. So they can still use star power. They want to be involved in the star power business. Make no mistake. But arm twisting, bro, they got a lot harder. They got a lot harder to twist the UFC's arm. I am certain that part of the reason they have made some of these business moves is because, yes, everyone wants guaranteed money. You like it when you open your bank account statement and that direct deposit hits every time it's supposed to. Everyone likes that, of course. But that it insulates you from a fighter. And let's be honest, what Conor McGregor did. Man, he manipulated the system smartly. I'll give him credit. No doubt about it. This is not a slander in any way. All the way to the top. He used all the rungs of the ladder to build his way up, and he did it by winning, by talking, pulled all the levers he could to get maximum results, and he asked things from them, and he got it, and they both made a lot of money in the process. Credit to him. I take nothing away from him. And they could still do that if they wanted to. And you could say, should they even go to war over a situation about Maine or co-Maine, blah, blah, blah. That's a different debate for a different time. All I'm trying to speak to is this leverage situation. I'm not sure I see it the same. I got to be honest. I think the UFC, it wasn't just a favor to ESPN Plus to put the pay-per-views there. It was a way to say, let's take out some of the volatility of this process. And that volatility is based directly on star power. You are less reliant on it now, man. That's a real market development. That's a change in the industry. This is what I keep talking about. These fighters don't want to get together. And even if they got together, I don't know how substantially it would raise pay. But it might give them some kind of guaranteed revenue themselves. It'd give them a share of this prosperity. Now the UFC is building up infrastructure to not only generate wealth in aggregate numbers, but wealth generated without reliance on UFC star power. Again, I'll say it one more time. Star power is still extremely valuable. It's a very, very hot commodity. But when it comes to a pissing contest, the UFC's got some insurance now. And I don't think we really realize that. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel. There's other videos you can watch right here. If you've never heard my SiriusXM radio show, there's a link in the description box below. You can try it for free for 30 days. The Luke Thomas Show airs weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Fight Nation, Channel 93. Catch y'all next time.